had no idea, right? And so part of this that you have to understand is there's so little education to the actual service member, right? There's tons of education of go out there and claim every disability on the planet to get 10%, right? And so they get educated on that when they're getting out of the military, but there's no education around finances. There's no education around the GI Bill. There's no education around VA loans. And so very
Welcome to Get Real 411, the podcast where real experts give real advice on all things real estate. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Brad.
Join us as we explore real estate successes and pitfalls through the eyes of our esteemed guests.
Now let's get real.
Okay, today we are excited to welcome our guest, Patton Gade. Patton is the National Director of Military Lending at a nationwide mortgage company. He is also a veteran, having served in the Army as an officer for 8.5 years. Patton and his team have a remarkable history of getting obstacles overcome and helping more veterans become homeowners. He was ranked the #1 VA loan originator in 2023 by the Scotsman's Guide. Welcome, Patton.
Yeah,
Thanks.
awesome.
Good to be
So
here.
excited to talk to you, Patton. We were chatting just before the show here, and I had reached out to you online, and I totally thought that you and Jamie knew each other well. And so my reaching out to you is very warm and like, hey, you guys know each other. By the way, we want to have you on the show. And you were just like, oh, you just went with it. So not to learn today that you guys really don't know each other. You just know of each other and you're friends on Facebook, like a lot of us are, but hadn't really connected. It's going to be exciting to kind of go through, who you are, what you do, how you're benefiting borrowers, and our audience there's a lot of them that are loan officers, there's real estate agents, but people generally in real estate that really, especially now after 2.5 years of a really tough market, heading into what we think will be a lower rate environment, a lot more activity. To hear how you've done just these giant numbers, even while everybody else has been slow. And so I'm super excited to kind of learn about you, but I'd love to have you start kind of at the beginning. Like, how did you get into the mortgage business to begin with?
You know what? I think it's probably the story you've heard over and over. I just kind of fell into it. It was kind of a totally random thing. When I got out of the Army, I went into a medical sales role, and I worked for Johnson and Johnson for a bunch of years, and then I went to a couple other companies, and at one point, I was just kind of like, man, I need to make a change. The company I was working for was like some unethical stuff going on. My spidey sense was starting to key, and I was like, you know what, I got to do something else. And I talked to my wife, and she goes, hey, call that guy we had dinner with like 6 months ago. And I'm like, oh yeah, he said come work for him. And he was a classmate of mine from West Point. And so I called him up and I go, hey, you said come work for you. What do you do anyway? And he goes, oh, I do mortgages. I'm like, oh, I'm a math geek from way back. So that makes sense. I've been in sales for a while. And so I plugged into that. It was a consumer direct uh unit. And so we were, buying Lending Tree leads and all that, Headset Warrior and
When was it?
going through all that and
When was
200
that?
dials. What's that?
Okay.
That was 2014. So it's been right at 10 years. October makes my 10-year anniversary. So I went there. My wife and I both actually worked there and did the whole Headset Warrior thing for about 4 or 5 years. And then, I realized really quickly that the people I would connect, you have to build a connection very, very quickly when you're on the phone with somebody. You've got 5 seconds max in order to say something, catch their ear to where you can, actually get into a real conversation. And I quickly figured out that the people that I could do that with were other veterans. And so it would be an immediate like, hey, it says here a VA loan. What service were you in? And that totally disarms them, right? And then you start talking, and now you can have a real conversation. Sometimes we'd talk for 20, 30 minutes about our time in service before we ever said anything about a mortgage. And so I realized that, hey, wait a minute, these people are my people. And I have a connection with them, and I have something to offer that's fantastic that nobody really understands. And so I learned really quickly that this was a product that is I mean, just widely misunderstood. Most loan officers have absolutely no clue what to do, what to say, what to talk about, how to calculate residual income and all the other stuff, right? So so I got good at it, and then the referrals started happening, and eventually I was able to transfer out of consumer direct to where I was building my own business, and using the network that I already had, and going, wait a minute, like I can help all these people, and my mindset shifted, and
Yeah,
business took off.
that
And
is
then COVID happened,
yeah,
and
then it did.
then it
Because
got
rates
stupid.
dropped so much. I will tell you though, first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your
You know, you
service.
were 8.5 years in the
Yes, sir.
Army and a Black Hawk helicopter pilot also, which
Way to spend your 20s.
Amazing way. The Black Hawk pilot stuff. That sounds like something straight out of Top Gun.
was fun.
That's incredible. My dad's a Vietnam veteran, which is the reason
quite that
I
cool.
am incredibly committed to veterans and VA loans, and have been for. I've been in business for 26 years, but we'll just pretend like I was 5 when I started. So, that's the reason. And that's why I've been involved with groups like Vetted VA and one of the original members there. You're right. Not only do a lot of loan officers not know how to do these loans, I believe, and don't quote me on this, I believe the last data study that we did showed that less than 30% of active duty and veterans even know that they have a VA home loan benefit, let alone know how to use it. When you start to get into things like the one-time close, when you start to get into things like joint loans, vet, non-vet, bonus entitlement, all of these things, it takes studying, it takes mastery, it takes educating yourself, and it takes keeping up on all the circulars and making sure you know what the latest and greatest is, and knowing how to apply that, because I think that veterans often are told no when they could be told yes. And so one of the reasons why, while I haven't until now gotten a chance to directly chat with you, that I've respected you from afar, is because you're one of the ones in there fighting the good fight and trying to make sure that not only are veterans served, but that other people in our industry are educated on how to do the same.
Oh, it's huge. And I think, I've said this before, but there are a lot of reasons why the VA loan has gotten a bad rap over the year. And one of them, I believe, is that because so many loan officers are not educated on how to do it, that what we did it to ourselves, I think. And what happened was this is, we'd originate a loan, it would get into underwriting. The underwriter knows all the guidelines. And the underwriter looks at it and goes, wait a minute, no, you didn't do residual income right. And this is denied. You're going to have to go FHA, or you're going to have to go, whatever the case is, you're going to have to solve it some other way. And the loan officer is embarrassed. And the loan officer doesn't have the intestinal fortitude necessarily to go back to their borrower and the realtors and go, hey, you know what? I screwed up. This was on me. So what they have is this big bureaucratic VA that we can blame it on. Well, you guys know the VA never sees a loan until after it's closed, except in a very, very small number of circumstances, very, very narrow circumstances does the VA have to approve it. And so we would go, LO would just go, oh, the VA, they're just so, and everybody buys it. And they go, holy cow, you're right, the VA sucks. And the borrower buys it because they're dealing with the healthcare system and all that stuff. Yeah. And so we did it to ourselves by not being educated, by not knowing the rules, and doing one VA loan every 3 years. That's not the right answer. For borrowers, they have to talk to somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. And, like Vetted VA, for instance, like the whole purpose of that education is to make us better so that we can serve the customer
You're 100%
better,
right.
because
And I
they
think
deserve
one
it.
of the byproducts of this narrative that was created in our industry is it also made consumers, which include home sellers and their agents, very leery.
Mhm.
I mean, I spend a pretty good portion of my time dispelling the myth that a VA offer is somehow less attractive. And
Oh.
we know that the VA loan is by far, of all the loans available in our industry, the most flexible, the most open to interpretation, and the most geared toward the borrower. Because if there's a way to make a VA loan happen, the VA is going to do it. And by the way, our regional loan centers across the nation are some of the best, easiest to reach, and helpful folks that you're ever going to find. So I hope that we continue to spread the message and educate that this is not a tough loan. It's not a bad loan. In fact, it's one of the best loans that there are out there.
Yeah, there's actually in the 26-7, there's actually the statement like an underwriter should find absolutely every reason to approve this loan that they possibly can. I'm I'm not quoting there, it's paraphrasing, but like find a reason to get this veteran in a home. Like for instance, condos, right? If a condo gets denied, all right, just submit a waiver. And they almost every time just go, okay,
So true.
waived.
Yeah, for
Good to
those of
go.
you,
Have
for
your have
those
your
of you
house,
that
you
are
know?
listening to this and not watching this on YouTube, as Patton is talking, Jamie and I are shaking our heads like bobbleheads, like, yes, we agree, we agree. It's all this is just so pointed and so true. And I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of the meat of VA loans because let's face it, you're one of the top producers, if not the top producer of VA loans in the nation. I think you did something like 86 million in volume over the last 12 months, something along those lines. If my numbers, it was probably more than that. Yeah.
Probably more than
Well,
that.
remember this stuff. Okay,
That may
there
be
you
this
go.
year
When
so
your
far.
definitely numbers are going to be more accurate than what we
Right.
have access to because they're delayed and that sort of thing. So 86 million year to date, and it's August. That's a staggering amount of loans for those of you that don't understand that volume, but that's giant. That's big for even a company, let alone an individual. But going back to just kind of VA and guidelines and consumer understanding this because it's not just the consumer, not just the veteran themselves understanding the value of the loan that they get, but it's the real estate agents, it's the loan officers, as you mentioned, like educational companies like Vetted VA and others that are out there. And I think you do a bit of that. I think you have a company also that does some education that I'd love you to talk about. Or I know you're the national director of military lending. So I don't know if that leads to helping other people with that as well, but you and your wife are heavily involved. So I'd like to just kind of get into some of the details that you are aware of that maybe most aren't aware of for VA loans. I'll give you one just quick example, then I'll pause. When I started in the business in 1993, I cut my teeth doing FHA and VA streamlines. That was big back in the early 90s. I mean, to the point where I was stuffing envelopes and sending out mailers and then going out and visiting people in their homes. And I visited so many veterans. I was just a young buck in my 20s, but I was driving around visiting veterans in their home. And they had VA loans, but their loan officer never told them the benefit of a VA streamline or IRRRL. And I was educating on what that benefit was and how we could structure it. And so it didn't cost them anything. And using the SR, back then we divided the SRP and the rebate pricing and all that, but we would do their loans for nothing and we dropped them. And they were so excited. And I got to know these people because I was in their homes and meeting them, face to face. And so that became a very important and integral part of my business. But as you do the majority of your business with VA loans, I know you know all the intricate things that really could benefit people. The fact that there is no loan limit and all those things. I'd love for you to just kind of express some of your knowledge here.
What you just said right there. I mean, well, first of all, let me tell a quick story. Is when I got into loans. I bought my first house in, I don't know, 2000 or something. I bought it. I was still active duty. It was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And, I bought the house, lived in it for a couple of years, ended up getting out of the Army and sold that house. Went on and bought another house, sold it, ended up in Phoenix, Arizona, bought another house here and was here for a number of years. And then I got into mortgages and I thought, man, I should pull my certificate of eligibility. I wonder if I've ever used a VA loan. Like seriously, I've bought and sold 3 or 4 houses, and I'm like, I wonder if I've ever used a VA loan. So I pull my certificate of eligibility. I'll be darned. I used a VA loan on my very first house. Had no idea, right? And so part of this that you have to understand is there's so little education to the actual service member, right? There's tons of education of go out there and claim every disability on the planet to get 10%, right? And so they get educated on that when they're getting out of the military, but there's no education around finances. There's no education around the GI Bill. There's no education around VA loans. And so very few people know what they're doing. And so they get out here in this big wide world, and they're being directed by their agents, the sell, oh, you can never get a VA loan approved around here. I'm doing a refinance for a couple right now. They bought 2 years ago in Georgia, and where they are in Georgia was their realtor said, you will never get a VA loan approved. As a matter of fact, the house you're in, it's not even going to pass VA inspection. Well, I looked at their house. Their house is in great shape. There's no reason it's not going to, so we're doing a refinance for them right now and doing a cash out and paying off a bunch of debt. And it's a fantastic loan. But I'm like, why on earth did your loan officer not like push for this? And it's fascinating to me. It's frustrating to me is what it is, really. But the VA loan is the most flexible product on the planet. And what I tell to realtors, especially in cases where I had a deal last probably November, December, something like that, where the borrower was buying a house, and it was, I don't know, it was like an $800,000 house, but it had appraised recently for like 900. Well, he was putting down 15% or something like that. The appraisal came in at 740. And you would think, okay, this is a big deal. Well, no, it's not. We'll just do the loan for 740. He was going to put down a big down payment anyway. We didn't even fight the appraisal. He was like, dude, I don't care what the appraisal is. I'm going to buy this house one way or the other. And I was like, okay, cool. Did that. Right. I had one a couple of years ago where there was wire fraud, and my borrower was sending a $500,000 down payment on a $2 million house. And I'm like, dude, title company doesn't have your wire. We're like a day past funding. Like, what the heck? He's like, dude, I sent it last week. I'm like, man. He goes, your closer emailed me. I'm like, no, she didn't. She would have never emailed you. And we found out that it was a fraud. Somebody had, hacked it or whatever. He sent $500,000 on a wire. And I'm like, all right, well, what are we going to do? I'm like, well, we can do it for zero down. And he, got Secret Service involved and all that stuff. And he got his $500,000 back, but we just did the loan for $2 million instead of 1.5. And it took a day. We just swapped everything. Okay, get it to underwriting. Boom, 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 boom. You close the next day. We're good. So
Yeah.
what loan can you do that with? When the 500,000 is up in smoke somewhere, potentially, you're like, how are you going to get the guy in his house?
You literally said,
so
and for you, this is, this is like, you do this, it doesn't matter. But did people hear you did a $2 million VA loan at zero down? Like, that's a statement, right? That right there is a soundbite. Like, you did a $2 million loan with zero down for a veteran. That's incredible.
We just closed a $3.7 million IRRRL. I think it funded today.
Top was maybe 1.5, 1.7-ish.
That was a good one. But there's so many things about the VA loan that people just don't know. Like the average person doesn't know that you can have two VA loans at the same time. We just closed a loan for a guy that it was his fourth active VA loan all at once, right? So the VA product itself is not designed to go build a rental portfolio, but it certainly can be a tool that you can use to do that. As you're a young service member and you're going from place to place, you can actually build a pretty nice portfolio with 2 or 3 houses, especially if you're in the Army, and if you're in the Navy and you're like San Diego and stuff like that, maybe not. But if you're in the mid-America where a house is 250 or 300, like sure, you can build 2 or 3 of those.
How is it possible to get more than one?
Yeah, so essentially you have the county loan limit, which in most counties is 766,550. Okay, and so that's your total amount. Jamie, I know these aren't the proper terms for loan officers, but we're gonna say this in something that a layman can understand. Okay, so your max is 766,550. If you buy a house for 300,000, you essentially have 466 left. If you buy another house for 250, now you still have 216,000 left. So you can stack multiple houses until you get to that loan limit. And even then, as long as you have at least $1 left of your VA entitlement, you can do another one and go up above that, as long as you put a 25% down payment on the amount of loan above that. And so you can have 2 or 3 or 4 potentially and fit it all into a VA loan.
But VA loans are owner occupied. And so Yep.
It has to be
So you're
owner
committing
occupied when
to-
you buy
to-
them.
To making that move and moving into the property, it's owner occupied. You're gonna rent out the existing home, and
That's
that's
right.
how you're getting more than one. Then how does that work when it comes to, and you can explain what ORL means, we use all these acronyms, right? But how does that work for doing a refinance or streamline on now what is a non-owner occupied?
Okay, I mean, so once it's non-owner occupied, it's still in a VA loan and you're still eligible to do the interest rate reduction loan. And that's like you mentioned earlier, the interest rate reduction loan is probably one of the best benefits of being in a VA loan is it's so fast, cheap, easy to do. You can do it even after you've moved out. The pricing is a hair different, but not significant. So you can, when rates drop, it's almost like a snap of a finger, like boom, it's kind of what I'd say to people is sometimes like, okay, look, you owe the VA. They don't actually owe the VA any money, but let's say, the way the VA looks at it is, hey, you owe us $300,000 at 7%. Rates are now 6%. How about you just owe us 300,000?
It's so true. And I love it when I get to share with
Yeah.
people that if you're just doing an earl, you don't need an appraisal. You don't even need a full credit report. Gosh, how many full credit reports do you think get submitted to underwriters all the time when all you needed was a mortgage only? Save yourself a lot of headache and hassle. You need to save a 0.5% rate. Now there's nuances some people don't think of, like recoup and other things that you and I know because we nerd out on VA loans all day long. But it's such an easy loan, and it can be extremely cost effective as well if your loan officer knows how to structure your costs and credits and things properly. It's a no-brainer, and we know opportunity is coming. It's already here. It's on the horizon with the talk of more rate cuts. All the folks that bought VA loans using VA financing over the last year or 2 years are probably going to be in a great position to start saving money. How are you? I mean, you've obviously done an extraordinary amount of business and you've built an incredible referral network. How do you prepare for times like we know are coming? How do you kind of maintain contact with your folks in your database?
So you know what? That's the biggest hole in my game right now is probably that. And I would say that 99% of loan officers are in that same boat. Like we all think that because we did a loan for a guy or a family, a year ago that they remember us. I'm pretty blessed in the sense that I think, I'm dealing with a bunch of military people and I've got a pretty good name for the military world. And so I think they remember my name pretty readily. And when they start thinking about refinances, I think part of my success is the fact that people just remember my name. But the reality is I've reached out to people over the last month and a half, and I'm embarrassed to say I've found people that are like, "Oh yeah, I
are
just
out there
closed."
and they want to retain
I'm
that
like,
portfolio, and they are.
I'm like, what? You're supposed to call me. We talked about this. We talked about it. So my game is, I mean, I've got a pretty large database, and my follow up with them has not been that's a big topic of conversation. My wife works for my company as well, and it's a big topic of conversation in our house right now. That like, okay, what are we really doing? And so I think we got a little taste of that here in the last month. It's an artificial drop there from, if you're in the broker world, right? We had this little artificial thing that was created. But I think it was a wake up call to really everybody like in your guys' seat, like, what do you do? Were you prepared for that? I don't know. Maybe you were. Did you find out there were a lot of holes in your game, either operationally or from a loan officer standpoint? You probably did. And so I think this kind of, now we're going to have a little bit of reprieve, I think, for a few months, but then it's going to come right back. And we need to be prepared for it as a industry. We need to be prepared for it. And I don't think everybody is. And if we're not,
I think that
largely
largely the industry is not prepared. And when we talk about the industry, we're not just talking about the operational infrastructure of the brokerage or the loan officers' capacity. We're also talking about the wholesale lenders. I mean, I'm thinking back to 2020, 2021. We were drowning in loans ourselves, and the issue was even if we could hire fast enough, the lenders couldn't either. And so there was just a bottleneck and a logjam. I'm starting to see lenders start to staff up a little bit more. We have certainly done that. I tend to be operational minded, so I tend to always be just like a half a step ahead of things. For Brad and I, we have a combined database that's pretty substantial. Brad has been diligent about it since it was in an Excel spreadsheet, back in the 90s. And so we always try to stay in front of our database, but my solution has always been, and we could obviously do better. We can all do better. My solution has always been create some automation behind that personal relationship. We have deep personal relationships with just about everybody we've worked with, but the game is so different today with servicing companies that want to retain their portfolios with millions of dollars of marketing behind them and so much technology that they're just, and then there are trigger leads. I mean, our borrowers are getting absolutely pelted with information, and some of these companies are not necessarily saying that they work with us, but they're alluding to it. And so to a certain degree, I think there's a little bit of misinformation out there, and our customers might even think they're starting the process with us, and by the time they figure it out, just do it. So I think there's a lot to be said there. There's a huge opportunity coming. Every single conversation I have with loan officers, whether they're here or whether they're elsewhere, is, what are you doing right now? What are you planning for? Do you have your process mapped out? Do you have your support in place? Are you doing the things you need to do? Not just to capitalize on the opportunity, but let's take it back to the reason, the why, to help more people. And that's the thing I want to see us as a community do, because we are the best solution for our customers. We will diligently, fairly, and honestly help them. And I want to see more veterans served by the wholesale channel than they have been in the past.
Yeah, I think that's great. But here's the other part of this whole, when we start talking about our IRRRLs and really truly taking care of veterans, I think this is something I want everybody who's listening to this, if you're a loan officer, to listen to this and pay attention, is the lowest rate is not necessarily the best deal for your borrower. And I get mailers all the time because I'm in the VA loan personally, and I'm at, I don't know, 1.875, I think is what my loan is. So I'm not eligible for an IRRRL anytime soon. But, I get stuff that says, hey, you can do a cash out at 3.75%. And I'm like, what? Really? Like, that doesn't exist. Not even anywhere close. But people, you can get to an IRRRL today and maybe meet recoup. And maybe it's completely legal. And maybe you can get to 4.75 or 5% or whatever. But you're probably charging them 2 points. And what I want everybody to think about is that what we need to do is educate the borrower and go, like, look, guys, the lowest rate is not the right rate for you today. The best deal for you today is to do it with no cost, and literally where I can cover fees with the rate spread, and go, look, here's a lender credit for X amount of dollars, and we're going to go to, 5.75 or whatever that number is on your rate chart, and go, because I believe, I've been wrong before. Like 2 years ago, people were like, hey, our rate's going to come down. I'm like, yeah, Barry Habib, he says 3 months. You can, do I have to do that? We can go back and delete that out or something. But, and everybody was wrong, right? All the experts were wrong. Like we weren't 6 months away from rates dropping. We were going to go up for another two years, right? And so the experts could be wrong this time. And I know that, I didn't anticipate a presidential candidate getting shot at. I didn't anticipate another one dropping out via social media. I didn't anticipate, 2 carrier strike groups in the Middle East. I didn't anticipate a whole squadron of F-22s over there. I didn't know that Ukraine was going to get invaded by Russia, a couple of years ago, whenever that was. I didn't, all these things. This world is a crazy place, and things can happen that can change things just in an instant. So, but all that being said, I believe rates are going to come down, right? We all think that that's going to happen for the next year, right? A gradual decline, hopefully. So let's do this. We think instead of waiting for another month or 2 months to see what happens, let's get you as low as you can get right now with no cost. Like legit, I'll eat your funding fee, I'll eat your title fees, like the whole deal. And like that's a no-brainer. Go as low as you can go with no cost. And now the recoup is 0 months or 1 month or 2 months. And now you can do another one in 9 months when when rates continue to drop, if we're right, then, but if we're wrong and rates are now 8%, you're not stuck at 7.25 anymore. You're not stuck at 6.75. We're down at 5 to what, you got some benefit there. But the people that are putting, 36-month recoups right now, bad news. And I think you're doing the wrong thing for the borrower.
You're
And we need to,
bad. And
we need to, I will
that
scream
is
that
the
from the top of
missing.
the
I'm so
hills.
glad you brought this up. That is really a missing piece of the industry today that I, as an advisor, as an originator, back when I originated loans, I, on every loan, it didn't matter whether it be a loan, FHA loan, conventional. If you did a refinance, I showed you what the recoup time was.
Yep.
Period.
Same.
Nobody does that. Like, here's your actual costs, not your recurring costs, but your non-recurring. This is what it's costing you to get the loan. I would educate every borrower so they understood it, so that the next time around, if I wasn't the loan officer, they understood what recoup meant. And it's going to be 9 months. It's going to be a year before you break even and you start getting a benefit. If you refinance before then, you might as well just throw the money away. And I would explain points and, tax breaks and, write-offs and acceleration, all those other things. But the main thing was the recoup time. So doing that zero cost loan, which is, and just so that the audience that's not mortgages understand, when we say EARL, it's an acronym. It stands for Interest Rate Reduction Refinance Loan. So that is just actually on VA loans, that is what they call them. They call them EARLs, or Interest Rate Reduction Refinance Loans. They have very specific guidelines, as Jamie mentioned, where they don't have income qualifying. You don't have to have an appraisal. You just have a mortgage rating without a full credit report. Like, it's a really easy loan. As Patton said, you basically just snap a finger and you can fund these. That's almost that's really, it doesn't take much. You can close these loans in 2 weeks. But it has to make sense. So just like you said, Patton, running the numbers and saying, hey, does it make sense? We're in a rate lowering environment. You're probably going to get another bite at the apple. If you pay, $10,000 to get this loan and you've only saved $4,000 when rates are lower, that's a big waste. So let's not spend that much money on this. Let's spend $2,000 just in case, or let's spend nothing because I think we're going to be able to refinance this in 6 months. That is pretty amazing. I think that's a tribute to why you're doing so much volume, is educating your borrowers on this. And so that, I think, is definitely a takeaway here.
We need to be advisors, right? And I say this often as well. We got a big job. We've got a lot of responsibility. We're affecting people's lives. We're helping them with what is usually the largest transaction they're ever going to have. And if we're so fixated on an interest rate as a professional that we can't even show our customer what maybe an eighth or a quarter even means to them in their monthly payment, with lower loan amounts, especially in some of our Midwest areas, it might be $20 a month, but our society, the news, they've conditioned everybody to be obsessed with that. Guess whose job it is to know the difference? Guess whose job it is to teach our clients what it really means to them? And I'll take it a step further. I'm with Brad. Obviously, he was my mentor coming up in the industry. I've never refinanced a client without coming to them with options first and said, now let's talk. How long do you think you guys are going to stay in your home? Is this your forever home? Is this, a home that you don't think is that plays into our recoup period when we're talking about refinancing too. And so to leave your customer better informed than they were when they began is the mark of a true professional who understands the impact that they have on their clients and on people. And so I applaud you for saying that. And I hope that other loan officers that are listening want to master their craft too. And if you're going to do a VA loan, here's my other thing. Please partner with somebody who knows how to do them right until you're at a point where you feel that you can.
Yeah, I mean, part of it too is, the customer, like you mentioned this. I mean, you look at the news and what are they talking about? All they talk about is rate. Right? How many times have you been at a dinner party or something and somebody goes, well, what do you do? And you go, oh, I do mortgages. And they go, oh, what are rates right now? I'm like, dude, I know nothing about your situation. I just met you. Like, let's talk. What's your credit score? What's your house worth? What's, how much do you owe on it? What kind of loan? Are you veteran? Do you have any bankruptcies or foreclosures? Like, I mean, how many questions do you need to ask somebody before you could even get them close to a rate? right? And so I just go, oh, geez,
Wow, I
well,
answered.
it depends, and that's not,
Obviously that's
what's
something
that?
people have been trained to do. When somebody said, what's the interest rate? I say, I don't know. What is the weather in America?
Oh, I love
And
that
then they're
answer.
like, huh? And I go,
Right.
yeah, there's, what city are you in? What time of
Too
year?
much.
Like, you can't answer that. There's so many
Yeah.
questions we have to ask you before we can answer what the interest rate is. And anybody that does answer that without asking those questions is somebody you shouldn't work with. And that's how,
Three.
yeah.
What's the rate? 3.
Yeah, it's and to your
Yeah.
point, the material that's going out from companies to homeowners that boast these crazy rates, but if they look at the tiny fine print, it's all the disclaimers are in there, but they're trying to hook them, right? They're trying to get them in because they know that once they do, the likelihood of the person not taking the effort to go and look elsewhere is high. And so sure, you can have a 4.75 rate. You're going to pay 3 points for it and it's not going to pencil out. But hey, in our mythical world, this is possible. We've never ever led with that as a company or as individuals. And we teach our folks, on the mortgage side of things, don't be a commodity. Don't be just as good as the rate you offer. Educate your customer on what's more important than the rate and how the entire picture pencils out for them. And when you do that, you're not transactional anymore. You're doing what you've done, Pat, and you're building relationships and trust and credibility. And to your point again, guess who they think of when they think about mortgages? The person that really helped them understand what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I think that I like to see our industry become more educated, and I like to see, quite frankly, a higher caliber of loan originator out there. And we're starting to see it, and it's great to see. And I hope that it continues. And I know that all three of us, on this show are all committed. I will gladly answer VA questions to anybody, anywhere, anytime, because to me, making sure the veteran gets the right advice is more important to me than whether I do the loan or whether it's my companies or any of that. And I think that there are a handful of us out there that are still doing that for others. And I would invite anybody who is thinking about taking a try at VA loans as an originator, whoever runs into issues and has questions, just know that everybody here, Pat and myself, Brad, we are here to help you do these correctly. Do not hesitate to reach out to us.
All right, Patton, I got a question for you. Tell us the story of the
Yes, sir.
craziest loan that you've done. Like, whatever it is, if it's the person, the way you have to structure it, what happened? What's the craziest one you've done?
Oh gosh.
Right?
This month? You know what? I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you the story of the really, it was literally one of the very first loans I ever did. So like I said, I got into the business, started like October 23rd or something, 2014. I'm in a call center. I'm dialing. Sometime in November, I get somebody on the phone and we start talking. And her story was she was a single mom. She actually worked for a major bank and was the executive assistant to a mortgage guy, which I found kind of funny. And she's like, yeah, no way I'm doing a mortgage here. She's like, I don't want anybody to know my business. I'm like, all right, cool. That makes sense. And so her son was, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old at the time. And she was about ready to drown in debt. Everything she had was maxed out, every single credit card. She never missed a payment. Her credit was still good. She had a bunch of equity in her house. And I go, look, here's the deal. We can do a cash out refinance. She was not a veteran. We can go to 80%. We can, pay off all your debt except, maybe 10 grand. She goes, oh my God, that would be amazing. And I want to say she had like 70 grand of debt we were going to pay off, like a big chunk, right? And well, the appraisal came in like 30 grand higher than we had estimated. So that gives us, 80% of that is 24,000, right? Now I can call her and I go, hey, guess what? Appraisal came in higher. I can pay off all your debt now. That extra 10 grand, pay it off. And guess what? If you want, I can give you about 10,000 more than that if you want it. It's going to change your payment like $50 a month or something. Like, do you want that extra 10 grand? She bursts into tears and she goes, "Oh my God, I owe my mom 10 grand." And I went, "Holy cow." And we closed that loan. I want to say it was December 23rd of 2014. 4 days later, whatever, she got her money a couple days after Christmas. Literally third or fourth, fifth loan I ever closed in my life. And I'll never forget it. I know her name. I could text her right now. She's come back to me several times for loans since then. But I realized right then that if you do this right, if you are truly serving people, if you care about them more than you care about the paycheck, that this job really, I mean, it's a job that can change people's lives. And we're coming into a spot here in this industry where, we're all focused on purchase, and we should be, because that's going to be, your bread and butter for hopefully forever, no matter what the market is. People will still be buying houses, right? But right now, there's record amounts of equity across the United States, but there's also record amounts of consumer debt. People are hurting. The economy has hurt a lot of people, and we have an opportunity here as rates go down. But also, if you know what you're doing, I have somebody that's refinancing right now from a 3.75 to a 6.25, but we're paying off $200,000 of debt with their equity. They're still saving $4,000 a month once I pay off all. So it's not all about the rate. Like, that's not somebody I would have gone in my database and gone, "Hey, I need to call them because they're probably looking to refinance." I would have never thought that. But they called me and they said, "Hey, can we talk about a refinance?" And I'm like, "Aren't you guys at like 3.75 for like $1 million?" And they're like, "Yes, but can you look at this with us?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's look at it." And I'm like, "All right, let's do this. What do you think?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. All right, let's do it." So anyway, so refinances can change people's lives, but mortgages in general, you have to have a servant's heart. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in the product that you have, and you have to come about it in a way that's truly beneficial to your borrower, because at the end of the day,
It
that's
is.
really
We have
all
to
that
tell them when
matters.
it doesn't make sense, as much as we have to tell them when it does. And,
Yeah.
sometimes the answer is not yet. Sometimes the answer is, here's a path that'll get you where you want to be, particularly with our home buyers. Personally, when I do get to originate, or when I get to jump in on a loan here at the company, it's fun. We had a good one. My first time ever with a VA cash out refi on tribal land, which of course was leasehold. And it happened that the property had been around for so long that we had to go all the way back to the original building of the development, and find like microfiche paperwork to tie the transfers of title all the way through. I couldn't believe it, but even the wholesale lender's head of underwriting couldn't wrap their brain around how to even make sense of it all. So I actually had fun. I called the RLC. I started talking to the specialist that was assigned to take a look at the file.
In the loan center.
Together, we got that sucker closed, but also I learned so much about tribal land. And so, 26 years. Last year, I learned something incredibly new. And now I feel like if I ever get another loan on tribal land, you better believe that I'm going to know how to do it. But then I went back to my lender because I'm close to them, and I've always been supportive of them. You guys want to jump on the call for 30 minutes? Let me educate you on what I did. Now you can help the next 10 loans that come in if you don't know how to solve it.
Yeah.
Well, now I know where to send those when somebody calls.
It's in her email signature, specialist in VA and tribal land.
Because, yeah. So I mean, you didn't ask me this question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Loan officers are like, "Okay, well, how do you do a ton of business?" Well, guess what? I don't mess around with, if somebody calls me, if one of my best realtors called me one day and goes, "Hey, Patton, I've got a client for you." I go, "Okay, cool." And they go, "Well, it's a DPA program that they want to do." And I go, "You know what? I've got somebody that can handle that, but it's not going to be me." So I'm not afraid to say, "You know what? That's not my wheelhouse. I'm not even going to take a swing at it." The analogy I use is, if you go golfing and you only golf one time a year, you're going to suck at it. and you're going to be spraying the ball all over the place, and it's going to be miserable for your whole foursome, and that's that's your buyer, your seller, and your agents, and you, right? It's going to be miserable for everybody. We'll get 18 holes done, but it's not going to be fun. But if you golf 3 times a week, you're going to be ripping the ball down the fairway most of the time, and it's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to look like you know what you're doing, and everybody's going to go, "Wow, that was look at this guy! Holy cow!" And that's what I do with VA loans, right? I'll just rip the ball down the fairway every single time. It doesn't matter if I have a bad lie, or it's in a divot or something. Who cares? I'm gonna rip that ball just like I would if it was teed up. And that's the thing is people
Mhm.
we try to be all things to everybody, especially in the broker community. Everybody goes, "Hey, I want to do DSCRs, I want to do this, and I got this eightplex. Do we have a lender for that?" Like, somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I got an eightplex." I go, "Yeah, call your local bank to get a commercial loan." I'm like, "I don't want to do it. I'm not gonna go through that." So, and because of that, I can have systems and processes and know what I'm talking about every single time without even thinking about it. And that helps me
Yep.
do 10 loans or 12 loans or 15 loans in a week or whatever it is, because I'm doing the same thing over and over. I'm not deviating left and right. Yes, I'll do conventional loans. Yes, I'll do just general FHA loans, but unless they're pretty
You've
vanilla,
become a
I'm like,
master of your
I'll send it to
clients and
somebody.
what they need. And so there's, in my opinion, it's the right call to know when it's going to take you so much time to try to learn something that you won't be able to help the other 4 people that need you. And that's why we have a great community, right? Like, same here. There are things I'm not great at. And so I know exactly where to go. There's a network of people I trust. I'm like, you need to call this person. Let me put you in touch with that person. That's what it's all about. Do what you do exceptionally well, create a super consistent experience for especially for your referral partners, because those are the folks that are going to keep working with you over and over again. And if they know every time they call you that they can be assured they're going to be told the truth, they can be assured that a loan is going to get done. If it can be done, it will be done. And something you mentioned early on today was, you touched upon loan officers being afraid to just admit that they made a mistake. Boy, is that ever true. And you know what's
Mhm.
interesting? Some of the best business relationships I've ever built happened because a mistake occurred and we just owned it because we're human. And they
So
respected that
true.
so much more than, what did I say one day recently, bad news doesn't get better with age. Like, let's just be human and let's be real. We made a mistake. We have a fix. This is what we think we can do. It's going to take a little extra time. I think we build more trust by being honest than we ever will by trying to hide things, because agents, many of whom are seasoned, have seen it all and they know when they're being avoided or we're skirting around the realities of the situation. And the good old fashioned truth
Mhm.
works wonders when we admit that we messed up.
That's right. You can't hide a
There you
dead fish
go.
in a foot
Yep.
locker. That's a good
No,
military
you can't.
word.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah,
But
very
if you
short amount
can
of
for
time.
just a short amount of time, then
Being a
then it's
specialist
trouble
is
for
so
everybody.
important, and that's what you've grown to be known for, which is why you track those loans. We believe the same thing here. We've got different divisions of the company. We have a reverse division, a commercial division. So if you have those loans, you don't want to give them to some stranger, because then you may lose out on the loan that you are a specialist in. But if it's internal, you can refer it, you get a piece of the action when it makes sense, and your client gets taken care of. It's just a better way to structure it. So look, totally appreciate that. And I know that's why you do big numbers. Absolutely. It's because you specialize. People know you specialize, and you know those loans like the back of your hand. Like, you know the guidelines. You don't have to research it. You can, within a few minutes, when you're doing the loan application with somebody or you're talking to them for the interview, you know exactly how you're going to structure. You hang up the call, and it's, basically just going through the mechanics at that point. So I get it. Coming from somebody, I used to close a big volume of loans. I used to close between 40 to 50 loans a month regularly. That's how you have to do it. You've got to be able to know guidelines in your head, know how to structure, know the stories and questions that you have to ask in order to get the right answers so that you can take next steps and not have to go back. So I can totally appreciate that, Patton. And you've become a star. I mean, look, we heard about you before we met you, and you're doing a great thing for veterans as well. So on top of all that, I would guess that your education at West Point, your military background, has really given you your servant leadership, and it's done well for you and your clients, and so we're proud to know you.
I get to
Appreciate
actually
you
say I
guys
know
having
you
me,
now.
for sure.
That's pretty awesome.
Can I give one? Can I give one more
Please.
loan officer tip? Just because so many people miss this. You mentioned referral partners, right? And when you say that, we all know what you're talking. You're talking about realtors or financial advisors or whoever it happens to be. What I would tell people is that your number one referral partner is your borrower, and too many people forget about that, and I think that's another reason why my business is super successful is I spend a lot of time with each borrower, really knowing them as people, understanding who they are, where they're going, what they're doing, talking about their family and their kids, and really understanding something about them to where literally I'll get a text from somebody and they'll be like, "Hey brother, hey, I want to talk to you." And I may not have talked to them for 2 years, right? But they're treating me like I'm their friend because I am their friend. I know about them and their family and things like that. And so if you think about this, your borrower, like if you talk to a realtor, how many loan officers do they know? 30,
Yep.
40? How many of those loan
Mhm.
officers are beating them up every week? Half of them? Like, hey, let me go to coffee. But how many loan officers does your borrower
Less.
know?
Yep.
Maybe one, maybe two, maybe max three, right? It's not like my Facebook feed is full of loan officers. I get it. But the average person, they have that one, right? Maybe two. And so if you do a great job for somebody, the chances of them having dinner with their friends and dropping your name are a lot higher than your realtor dropping your name, right? And so not to ignore the realtors. I'm not saying that if you're a realtor on here, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying that we ought to be hyper focused on our borrower and that relationship and that experience for them.
Yeah.
And that's how you grow your business, by being
They have to
great
matter.
to them.
We've gotten kids and grandkids when they've grown up loans from original customers, and they'll call and say, "You may not remember me." Yeah, I do. How's Joe? I mean, yes, we do. We remember you. Your story mattered. You're a family. What we worked on together impacted your future. Of course, we know who you are. We're so glad to hear from you. We had somebody call. They got to my assistant today, and she said, "This person says they knew your mom." Da 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 da. And oh yeah, unlocked file cabinet in brain. I remembered all the loans we'd done and where we last left off and all that stuff. But they do matter. And if you're doing it right, then they matter. And because they matter, you're the person they trust.
Yeah, I got a call, I don't know, 3, 4 months ago from a guy, and he said exactly that. "Hey, you probably don't remember me." I'm like, "Sure I do. We closed your loan in July." And literally, I don't know why I remembered this about this particular guy. I'm like, "Yeah, totally. You were just finishing up your chapter 13. And like, what was that, summer 2017?" He goes, "Yeah. And you did a refi for me right after." I'm like, "Yeah, I remember that." He goes, "My daughter's buying a house. Can you help her?" I'm like, "Yeah, heck yeah." It was literally
Yeah.
like 7 years
I'm
later,
so glad you brought
but he
that
called
up.
me, and
You
so
are spot on, and this is something I teach internally here to our loan officers. Like, you really do have to treat your clients as referral partners. You have to, because they will see
yeah.
you do a good job by them. You do what's right. You educate them through the process. Not only will they continue to come back to you, they'll feed you for a lifetime. They'll feed you their friends, their family, their relatives, their coworkers, all of that.
Especially in as refi season, whether it's a boom or a slow thing or whatever, as we start doing refinances, think about this too, is when you're buying a house, how many of your friend group is actually buying a house at the same time? Like none of them, right? So are you going to get a referral from that person purchasing a house? Like maybe not. But when you refinance somebody, you save them $1,000 a month, or you pay off all their debt and now this weight just came off their shoulders and that you changed their life. Are they going to talk about that over a beer down at Cheers down the road or whatever, right? they're going to have a dinner party and they're going to go, oh my God, like, hey, Patton, looks like weight is lifted off your shoulders. You're like, hell yeah, I just refinanced my house. I'm saving $2,000 a month. Like, that's the
that's
thing
true.
people talk about. Right. And so, like, that's what
I
we
love
should all
it.
be
All right,
looking for
Patton.
right there.
Jamie has this thing she'd like to ask at the end of every interview, so she's going to ask this question. And
Okay.
again, I just
I
want
should have watched one of your podcasts.
I just want to
before I
thank you
came on
again
here.
for joining us, man.
Yeah.
It has been a real pleasure. You are sincerely a good person and a good guy, and I can see why your customers are attracted to you. And beyond that, we want our listeners to know how to reach you if they want to reach you, whether they're a loan officer that just wants to bounce something off of you on a VA loan, or a borrower that wants to talk to a pro. How can they reach you?
You know what? My first and last name. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, and it's just all
And that's
Patton Gade. So I think Instagram and YouTube are both
Okay.
Patton _ Gade, and Facebook. I'm the only Patton Gade out there. So that's one good thing about my
Love it.
name is there's not another one.
PATTONGADE.
That's right. Okay. So, knowing everything that you know today, if you had an opportunity to go back and talk to the Black Hawk helicopter pilot, to yourself, in your 20s, what advice would you give yourself?
Actually, it's a good question. I get to talk to a lot of young West Point graduates that are a year, 2 years outside of West Point. And as I talk to them, one of the things I always do, like, I'm what they call an old grad at this point. And what I tell them is like, hey, make sure you spend time. Right now, you graduate from West Point, you all go into the Army, all 1,000 of you, and you're all over the place. But you run into each other and you see people, and some of them you knew, some of them you didn't. But you're all doing the same things, right? You're leading small teams of soldiers. You're leading a company of 60 or 100 people, but you're all doing roughly the same thing as you progress along your career. And so it's really easy to just be like, oh yeah, we're all doing the same thing. Let's not even talk that much. And then as I got out of the military, it was, you'd travel for business or whatever, and you wouldn't really pay much attention to, hey, you know what? I have contacts that live in Denver. Why didn't I reach out to them when I was there for a 4-day business trip? I had a free night on Thursday night or whatever, right? And so what I tell these guys is like, look, be intentional about your connections, be intentional about the people that you have relationships with today, and make sure you build and maintain those over the course of time. And you're going to be in a lot better place, 10 years from now, 20, 30 years from now. My 30-year reunion is coming up here in a month. And essentially, I know that I could go on our class Facebook page and I could be like, hey, I need help with X. And I would it could be, you could give me the most random subject and I could post it in there and say, I need help with, a specific type of attorney in this state. And I would have recommendations in a matter of an hour or two of who so those connections are important. And so I don't think I was as intentional about it back then. And I'm getting better at it, but I'm still not probably great at it. But that's what I would say is be intentional about the people that you know and love, and be intentional about building that relationship.
They've completely changed the entire trajectory of my career and my life over the years. And much like you, I didn't focus on it as much then as I have now. And it is incredible to have so many people around you that that whatever life throws at you, there's somebody in your circle that's going to lend you a helping hand that probably knows more about it than you do. I think that's so incredibly true. So I'm super grateful to now say I have a relationship with you, and I know there's another great VA loan officer out there if I ever need to pick your brain on something that comes across. So really appreciate you, Patton, and it's been great to get to know you and your story. And hopefully I'll see you at an event sometime soon here. And it's been great having you.
Great to be back.
I appreciate you guys.
Get Real 411 is hosted by Brad Rice and Jamie Kavanaugh, produced by Stuart Jellin, and recorded live from the Amerifund Home Loan Studio in Simi Valley, California. You can learn more about the show at getreal411.com and watch full episodes on YouTube. If you're interested in being a guest on Get Real 411, email booking@getreal411.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.